Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. The UN atomic watchdog has reached an agreement with Iran to continue its necessary verification and monitoring Iran's nuclear activities for up to 3 months. In a press briefing following his return from Iran, the IAEA's chief Rafael Grossi said there will be less access and no more snap inspections from Tuesday. Grossi said talks with Iranian officials have produced a good, reasonable result that salvages the situation for now. The United Nations has called on Myanmar's military to stop the repression immediately and release the prisoners. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' statement comes as a general strike is being observed in Myanmar to oppose the coup. Thousands of protesters have gathered across the country despite the military ruler's threat that confrontation would cost more lives. In India, hundreds of thousands of people have gathered in northern Punjab state in a show of strength against the new farm laws. It is one of the largest rallies against the central government's controversial law so far. The farmer leaders also called on supporters to amass outside the capital, New Delhi, on the 27th of February. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will end in early 2022. WHO's Director for Europe, Hans Kluge, said the pandemic will still be prevalent in 2021 but more manageable than last year. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected more than 111 million people so far. Pakistan has reported 16 deaths overnight, the lowest number of fatalities since the second wave started in the country. And in the Pakistan Super League, Lahore Qalandars will take on Quetta Gladiators today at National Stadium in Karachi. Earlier, Qalandars beat Peshawar Zalmi by 4 wickets to register their first win of the tournament. Islamabad United also opened their winning account in the league by defeating Bulletin Sultans by 3 wickets. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. The United Nations atomic watchdog has reached an agreement with Iran to continue its necessary verification and monitoring of Iran's nuclear activities for up to 3 months.
In a press briefing following his return from Iran, the IAEA's chief Rafael Grossi said there will be less access and no more snap inspections from Tuesday. Grossi said talks with Iranian officials produced a good, reasonable result that salvages the situation for now. The IAEA chief said the understanding allows the parties to suspend or extend the agreement. He added that temporary bilateral technical understanding also paves way for political consultations at other levels. Grossi's visit to Iran came before a February 23rd deadline set by Iran's parliament for the U.S. to lift crippling sanctions or Tehran will halt snap IAEA inspections. Earlier, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif also said that the U.S. must take corrective measures to revive the JCPOA.
Now, a senior White House official says the U.S. has begun communications with Iran over its detention of American citizens. In an interview, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the U.S. will not accept unlawful detention of its nationals. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said that Iran has received messages from Swiss embassy and other states to pursue this issue. However, Saeed Khatibzadeh debunked the claims of direct talks with the U.S. He reiterated that Iran's policy is to get released its prisoners in the U.S., adding that Iran is ready to address the issue. Now, the UN's envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, has expressed disappointment over lack of any progress in the latest prisoner exchange talks. Griffiths urged the warring parties to continue discussions to expand the arrangements for release of more detainees. He called for unconditional release of all sick, elderly and children detainees, as well as civilians, including women and journalists. The latest round of UN-backed negotiations for the prisoner exchange ended without a deal. Yemen's internationally recognized government and the Houthi rebels blamed each other for the lack of progress. In January, the negotiations began in Jordan with the aim of freeing a total of 300 prisoners on both sides. Now, Indian occupation forces continue to carry out raids and crackdown operations in many parts of occupied Kashmir. They conducted house-to-house searches in different areas of the Badgaam district. The troops also launched a massive cordon and search operation in the Shopian district. They have arrested a youth in Pulwama district. The personnel forced local shopkeepers to close their outlets. Meanwhile, the All Parties Hurriyat Conference has called for a shutdown in the valley on the upcoming visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In India, hundreds of thousands of people have gathered in northern Punjab state to show strength against the new farm laws. It is one of the largest rallies against the central government's controversial legislation so far. The farmer leaders also called on supporters to amass outside the capital, New Delhi, on 27th of February. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Indian growers have already been camped outside Delhi for nearly 3 months. Earlier, farmer leaders organized another grand meeting as part of the ongoing protest. Both sides have met for several rounds of negotiations but failed to break the deadlock. Growers have vowed to carry on the protests until the laws are rolled back. Moving on now, the United Nations has called on Myanmar's army to stop the repression immediately and release prisoners. Secretary General Antonio Guterres was speaking to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. The UN chief said they see the undermining of democracy, use of brutal force and arbitrary arrests in Myanmar. Guterres said serious violations against minorities, including the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya, must end. Earlier, the US said it will continue to take firm action against Myanmar's authorities over the violence. Meanwhile, a general strike is being observed in the country to oppose the February 1st military coup. Thousands of protesters have gathered despite the threat of more violence by the military rulers. Now, China has called for a reset in its relations with the United States. Speaking at a forum sponsored by China's foreign ministry, top diplomat Wang Yi described the bilateral relations at crossroads. Wang urged the U.S. to respect China's core interest and stop smearing the ruling Communist Party. He called on Washington to lift restrictions on trade and cease interference in the Chinese territories. Wang added the two powers can work together on global challenges if they repair bilateral relationship. He reiterated that Beijing was ready to reopen constructive dialogue with Washington aimed at solving problems. Now, the relations between the two countries remain strained over a host of issues including trade, pandemic, Taiwan, Hong Kong and Xinjiang. Now, the World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will end in early 2022. WHO's director for Europe, Hans Kluge, said the pandemic will still be prevalent in 2021, but more manageable than last year. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected more than 111 million people so far. More on the coronavirus in this report.
The number of new coronavirus cases in the hardest hit areas around the world is decreasing. However, the new variants are causing the cases to flare up in many other.
We'll have the news, but right now we have to go live. DG ISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar is briefing the media.
2017 को आर्मी चीफ जनरल कमर जावेद बाजवा की क़यादत और उनकी सरबराही में ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद का आगाज़ किया गया। इस ऑपरेशन की बुनियादी अहमियत जो इसे दीगर तमाम ऑपरेशन से मुमताज़ करती है वो ये है कि ये ऑपरेशन एरिया स्पेसिफिक नहीं था, इसका दायरा कार पूरे मुल्क पे मुहित था। इसकी जो स्ट्रेटेजिक इंटेंट अगर मैं कहूँ कि क्या स्ट्रेटेजिक इंटेंट थी
DG ISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar is holding the Pakistan's military press briefing, and he's just speaking about the Operation Raddul Fasad, which was started in 2017. And as he mentioned, it was not a specific area operation, but the operation was conducted throughout the country.
बहाल हो और टेररिस्ट और शरपसंद अनासर का फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्शन कर्टेल करके उन्हें मुकम्मल तौर पर गैर मुयस्सर कर दिया जाए। और इसी के साथ ये कहना भी बेजाना होगा कि रद्दुल फसाद का बुनियादी महवर जो है वो अवाम है। While armed forces fight terrorists, terrorism and extremism can only be defeated by the civil law enforcement agencies and society as a whole. That's how we look at it. और इसी मुनासबत से हर पाकिस्तानी ना सिर्फ इस ऑपरेशन का हिस्सा है बल्कि होल ऑफ नेशन अप्रोच के तहत हर पाकिस्तानी रद्दुल फसाद का सिपाही है।
Major General Babar Iftikhar has stated that terrorism can only be defeated by the forces and with them together with the civilians, and every civilian is also an equal part in defeating the terrorism.
ये ऑपरेशन टेररिस्ट्स और इंतहा पसंदी के खिलाफ ऐसे वक्त में शुरू किया गया जब दहशतगर्दों ने कबायली अजला में अपने इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की तबाही और मुख्तलिफ ऑपरेशंस में भारी नुकसान उठाने के बाद पाकिस्तान के तूल अर्ज़ में पनाह लेने की कोशिश की। दहशतगर्द उनके सहूलतकार शहरों, कस्बों, देहात, स्कूलों, मदारिस, इबादतगाहों, कारोबारी मराकज़, हत्ता के बच्चों और ख़वातीन को भी निशाना बनाकर जिंदगी को मफलूज करने की नाकाम कोशिशों में मसरूफ।
Raddul Fasad operation was started at such a time when in the rural areas the terrorists tried to hide, and the terrorists were targeting civilians, they were targeting women, children, elderly people and all ways of life.
एक प्रॉन्ग काउंटर टेररिज्म डोमेन को देखता था और दूसरा काउंटर वायलेंट एक्सट्रीमिज्म। As far as counter terrorism prong is concerned, उसके चंद बुनियादी कार्डिनल्स में एक तो बेसलाइन ये थी कि ताकत का इस्तेमाल सिर्फ रियासत की सवाबदीद है। इसके साथ मौसर बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम के ज़रिए वेस्टर्न जोन का मुकम्मल इस्तेहकाम और मुल्क भर में दहशतगर्दों की सपोर्ट बेस का खात्मा, ये चंद इम्पॉर्टेंट कार्डिनल्स थे जो काउंटर टेररिज्म प्रॉन्ग था। अगर काउंटर वायलेंट एक्सट्रीमिज्म प्रॉन्ग की बात करें,
and he's just laid out an important cardinal, and he said that the use of force can only be used by the state, and non-state actors will be considered terrorists.
A superior argument, as we say. So इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में नेशनल एक्शन प्लान पर अमल दरामद, कबायली इलाकों की कौमी धारे में शमूलियत, तालीमी, मदरसा और पुलिस रिफॉर्म्स में हुकूमती काविशों में भरपूर मुआवनत के ज़रिए शिद्दत पसंदी के अवामिल पर काबू पाना शामिल था। इस ऑपरेशन के तफसीली जायजे में पाकिस्तान की दहशतगर्दी के खिलाफ जंग में जो ग्रैंड स्ट्रेटजी थी.
Major General Babar Iftikhar has also stated that the National Action Plan, which had the following features also, it was obviously to bring out the rural areas into the mainstream under the state. And in the National Action Plan also police reforms were introduced, and all those violent factors in the society were also targeted.
क्लियर एंड होल्ड फेज जो थी उसके तहत मेजर ऑपरेशंस के बाद मुख्तलिफ एरियाज़ को दहशत गर्दों से क्लियर करवाया जा चुका था और कबायली इलाकों में रियासत की रेट बहाल हो रही थी. ये 2017 तक हम क्लियर एंड होल्ड फेज में पहुंचे थे. सो रद्दुल फसाद बिल्ड एंड ट्रांसफ़र फेज का आगाज है. इस दौरान हार्ड अर्न गेन्स को इरिवर्सिबल बनाना हमारी जिम्मेदारी थी और यही चीज़ असल में दहशतगर्दी के खिलाफ कामयाबी का हकीकी पैमाना भी है.
Major General Babar Iftikhar is holding a military media briefing, and he just stated in 2017 in most of the rural areas the army was successful in implementing the state's writ, and all the gains that the army and the armed forces gained of the Raddul Fasad operation, when the main target was to keep it there and to maintain it.
के तहत मुल्क भर में 3,75,000 से ज़ायद इंटेलिजेंस बेस्ड ऑपरेशंस किए गए, जिसमें CTD, IB, ISI, MI, पुलिस, FC, रेंजर्स, इन तमाम इदारों ने भरपूरता.
Major General Babar Iftikhar has just stated in the Raddul Fasad operation, collectively there were 375,000 operations conducted, collectively by all the forces.
इंटेलिजेंस बेस्ड ऑपरेशंस हुए हैं. सिंध में 1.5 लाख से ज़ायद, बलूचिस्तान में अब तकरीबन 80,000 से ज़ायद और खैबर पख्तूनख्वा में भी 92,000 से ज़ायद इंटेलिजेंस बेस्ड ऑपरेशंस अभी तक इन 4 सालों में कंडक्ट किए जा चुके हैं. इनमें चंद बड़े और अहम IBOs भी शामिल हैं जिनकी वजह से अर्बन टेररिज्म पर
150,000 operations were conducted in the province of Sindh, and 80,000 operations were conducted in the province of Balochistan, and 92,000 operations were conducted in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in the last 4 years.
गवादर में निजी होटल पर जो हमला हुआ उसमें दहशतगर्दों को जन्म हासिल किया गया. खैबर पख्तूनख्वा में एग्रीकल्चर यूनिवर्सिटी पेशावर पर खुदकुश हमले को नाकाम बनाया गया. सिंध में अगर आप लें तो कराची स्टॉक एक्सचेंज हो या चाइनीज़ काउंसलेट पर हमला हो, इनको नाकाम बनाया गया. तो ये सिर्फ चंद एक मिसालें मैंने आपको दी हैं जिससे आपको ये वाज़े होता है कि इस
stated a few examples of how the Pakistani army successfully foiled terrorists and their plans to disrupt peace in different areas of Pakistan.
इस सारी कार्रवाई में मैं एक दफ़ा फिर ये रीइटरेट करना चाहूँगा कि इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसीज़ ने अनथक मेहनत और कुर्बानियों से कई बड़े बड़े दहशतगर्द नेटवर्क्स को डिसमेंटल किया. इन 4 सालों के दौरान 5,000 से ज़ायद थ्रेट अलर्ट्स जारी की गई और उनमें से बेशतर मटीरियलाइज होने से पहले ही न्यूट्रलाइज कर दी गई. ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद के दौरान खैबर 4 ऑपरेशन भी किया गया जिसका मकसद राजगाल वैली को क्लियर कराना और उस साइट पे जो पाक अफगान बॉर्डर है उसको महफूज करना था. और शुमाली वज़ीरिस्तान में पिछले साल अगस्त में ऑपरेशन दवातोई किया गया.
Major General Babar Iftikhar has just stated that the intelligence agencies in Pakistan have dismantled many networks, and the intelligence agencies have been able to successfly neutralize more than 5,000 threats in the country of terror. And he's also spoken about the Khyber 4 operation, which was started right after the Raddul Fasad operation, and the main target was to clear the Pak Afghan border and the Rajgar Valley.
के हवाले से बहुत पेशरफ्त हुई है. 72,000 से ज़ायद गैर कानूनी असलहा और 5 मिलियन से ज़ायद एमुनिशन मुल्क भर से रिकवर किया गया. इंसिडेंट्स और कैजुअल्टीज़ में अगर आ जाएं तो 2017 से 2021 के दौरान मुल्क भर में दहशतगर्दी के
Large amount of weapons were recovered throughout the country, and more than 5 million ammunition was recovered from across the country.
इंसिडेंट्स हुए और इन तमाम इंसिडेंट्स और इन तमाम ऑपरेशंस के दौरान जो रद्दुल फसाद के तहत किए गए, पिछले 4 साल में 353 दहशतगर्दों को जहन्नुम वासिल किया गया और उसके अलावा सैकड़ों को गिरफ्तार किया गया। अगर लॉ इन्फोर्समेंट एजेंसीज की कैपेसिटी इन्हांसमेंट की बात की जाए, इसी ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद के तहत
During the operation Raddul Fasad in the last 4 years, more than 300 terrorists were sent to help, and many terrorists were also arrested.
एफसी के 58 नए विंग्स कायम किए जा चुके हैं, जबकि मजीद 15 विंग्स का क़याम अमल में लाया जाना बाकी है। बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट के
More
तहत
frontier corps wings
पाक-अफ़गान
are
सरहद
being
की बाढ़ का
developed
काम
to counter terrorism
मुकम्मल
in
कर
the
लिया
country.
गया और पाक ईरान बॉर्डर पर 43% से ज़ायद का काम हो चुका है। इसके साथ साथ 497 फोर्ट्स, बॉर्डर पोस्ट्स और कई बॉर्डर टर्मिनल्स भी तामीर किए जा चुके हैं। इसी मद में अगर मैं सिर्फ चमन और तोरखम की बात करूं, तो वहाँ पे इंटीग्रेटेड ट्रांजिट ट्रेड मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम लगाया जा रहा है।
Also, the Pakistan-Iran border is being secured, and it's more than 40% of the fencing has been done. There have been built border forts, and also border terminals have been built.
इसी तरह बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट डिवीजन जो कि मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंटीरियर के तहत रेज किया गया है और उसको एक एडिशनल सेक्रेटरी उसको हेड कर रहे हैं, और अब बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट का जो लीड एजेंसी है वो मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंटीरियर है। इसी के साथ कबायली अजला में
Also, a border management division has been produced, and which is being led by an additional secretary, and which is coming under the direct lead of the Ministry of Interior,
इस दौरान
and that purpose is to secure the borders of Pakistan.
72 किलोमीटर से ज़ायद एरिया इस वक्त क्लियर किया जा चुका है। मैंने जिस तरह कहा, ये एक बहुत पेंस टेकिंग और स्लो प्रोसीजर है। इस दौरान, इस डी माइनिंग के दौरान 2 इंडिविजुअल्स हमारे सोल्जर्स जो डी माइनिंग कर रहे थे वो शहीद भी हुए हैं और 119 ज़ख्मी हुए हैं। सो बट अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह इसकी प्रोग्रेस भी बहुत अच्छी चल रही है। बट
Many tribal districts have also been cleared, and the demining process in various tribal districts is also under process, and is being continued, and the tribal districts are also being cleared as we speak. Demining process is on way.
इस मद में शामिल हैं और ये प्रोसेस बहुत एहतियात के साथ और बहुत कंसंट्रेशन के साथ आगे बढ़ रहा है।
And this process is also continuing with extreme care, and the tribal districts are also being cleared, and the demining process is also active.
इसी तरह जब मेजर ऑपरेशंस शुरू हुए कबायली इलाका जात में, तो बहुत सी चेक पोस्ट्स वहाँ पे कायम की गई उन ऑपरेशंस को सपोर्ट करने के लिए और वहाँ पे जो लोग थे उनकी हिफाजत के लिए। ऑपरेशंस ख़त्म होने के बाद, और जैसे मैंने कहा कि अब हम नॉर्मलाइजेशन की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं, तो अब इस बिल्ड एंड ट्रांसफर फेज़ में वो जो अगर 450 तकरीबन चेक पोस्ट अगर उस वक्त थीं, तो अब ये रिड्यूस होके 250 से भी कम रह गई हैं। सो तकरीबन 42% से ज़्यादा उनमें कमी आई है, और ये पोस्ट भी जो अभी वहाँ पे मौजूद हैं वो लोगों की हिफाजत के मद में रखी गई हैं।
And for the operations that were conducted in the rural areas, Major General Babur has stated that the checkposts were constructed there and just to safeguard the civilians there. And he's just stated that because of the Operation Raddul Fasad, now the checkpost, the quantity of the checkpost has reduced to 250 from 400, and which are only being installed for the protection of the civilians and the people living in those areas.
इसके अलावा बलूचिस्तान में पाक फ़ौज ने 3865 जो लेवीज़ के अहलकार थे उनकी ट्रेनिंग भी की, और इस साल मज़ीद तकरीबन 3500 से ज़्यादा लेवीज़ एहलकारों की ट्रेनिंग जारी है।
The Pakistan Army conducted
इन ऑपरेशंस
more than
के
the training of Levy's forces of more than 3,500 in Balochistan.
डिस्प्लेस्ड पर्सनल, इनकी अपने घरों को डिग्निफाइड और बाहिफाजत वापसी एक सब्र आज़मा और मुश्किल मरहला था। अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह एक मरबूत और एहसन हिकमत अमली के नतीजे में मुख्तलिफ TDPs कैंप्स में मौजूद 96% अफराद अब अपने घरों को लौट चुके हैं। मुल्क में शिद्दत पसंदी और दहशतगर्दी के ख़ात्मे के लिए नेशनल एक्शन प्लान के तहत मुख्तलिफ इक़दाम किए गए। उनमें दहशतगर्दों को कैफरे के दार तक पहुँचाने के लिए
tribally displaced people have started returning to their homes after the forces have cleared those areas of the terrorists.
344 दहशतगर्दों को डेथ सेंटेंस दी गई। उनमें से 58 की सज़ा पर अमल दरामद हो चुका है, जबकि 106 दहशतगर्दों को उम्र कैद और 195 दहशतगर्दों को मुख्तलिफ दौरानिए की इम्प्रिजनमेंट की सज़ा दी गई है और उन रेफर्ड केसेस में 5 एक्विट भी हुए।
Major General Babar Iftikhar has stated 344 terrorists were awarded with the death sentence, 106 terrorists were awarded with the life sentence.
एसेट्स को फ्रीज किया गया और उनकी नकलो हरकत पर पाबंदी लगाई गई।
Assets were
मनी
freezed.
लॉन्ड्रिंग, भत्ताखोरी, अगवा, बराए तावान और टारगेट किलिंग पर एक मौसर लाए अमल से काबू पाया गया।
And we controlled money laundering and with a
वायलेंट एक्सट्रीमिज्म
money ransom and these terrorist activities through a calculated plan.
2017 से अब तक 1200 से जायद सब नेशनलिस्ट शिद्दत पसंदों ने हथियार डाले और ख़ुद को अमन की राह पर गामजन किया। हेट स्पीच, शिद्दत पसंद मवाद पर पाबंदी लगाने के साथ साथ दहशतगर्दों के बयानिया और उसकी तशहीर को मुअस्सर तरीके से नाकाम बनाया गया। वफाकल मदारस और उलमा की बाहमी मशावरत से पहली मरतबा 1800 से जायद मजहबी रहनुमाओं ने पैगाम पाकिस्तान के नाम से दहशतगर्दी और इंतहा पसंदी के ख़िलाफ़ यक ज़बान होकर एक इंतहाई मुअस्सर बयानिया दिया। पैगाम पाकिस्तान ने दरअसल मज़हब के नाम पर नौजवानों और लोगों को दहशतगर्दी के चुंगल में जाने से बचा लिया और मुआशरे में फ़िरका वारियत और इंतहा पसंदी पर काबू पाने में बहुत मदद दी है।
Major General Babar Iftikhar has also stated during the operation a lot of the terrorists and the groups had laid down the weapons and hate speech was controlled and successfully the forces were able to defeat the violent narrative of these networks. And he's also stated more than 1,800 religious leaders across the country with the platform of Paigam-e-Pakistan produced a collective narrative defeating terrorism in the and violence which was being produced, which was being built by these terrorists in the youth of the country, was also successfully defeated.
पाकिस्तान से ताल्लुक़ रखने वाले मेहदी शाह रिजवी और उनकी फैमिली का एतराफ़ और उनका बयान जो तमाम चैनल्स पे टेलीकास्ट हुआ वो एक वाज़ी मिसाल है। इसी तरह ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद के दौरान पाकिस्तान ने होस्टाइल इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसीज़ की तरफ से पाकिस्तान मुखालिफ साजिशों को बेनकाब किया और ख़ास तौर पर दहशतगर्दों की मुआवनत और ट्रेनिंग के हवाले से नाकाबिल तरदीद सबूत दुनिया के सामने रखे। अगर हम इसी मद में ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद के तहत और किए जाने इक़दामात की बात
stated that the Indian terrorism was exposed by the statement which was released and which was shown on all the media locally and international of Mehdi Shah Rizvi, which also exposed the Indian terrorism activities inside the country.
रद्दुल फसाद के दौरान ही पाकिस्तान में सिक्स्थ पॉपुलेशन सेंसस का भी इनकाद हुआ। इस दौरान भी सिक्योरिटी फ्राहम करते हुए 7 जवानों ने जाम शहादत नोश की।
During the Operation Radzul Fasad, 6 population censuses were occurred, and during these censuses, 7 forces, armed forces members, soldiers got martyred.
क्राइम इंडेक्स में 2014 में दुनिया में 6ठे नंबर पर था, आज वो 106 नंबर पे आ चुका है और ये इस अंडरटेकिंग रद्दुल फसाद ऑपरेशन की कामयाबी का एक और मुंह बोलता सबूत।
And he's also stated the crime index number for the city of Karachi, which was at number 6, and right now it has reached to the 106th position, and this is because of the successful conduction of the Raddul Fasad operation.
831 तरक्याती कामों का आगाज हो चुका है, जबकि बलूचिस्तान में सीपैक के अलावा हुकूमत पाकिस्तान के विजन बलूचिस्तान के तहत बड़े बड़े मंसूबों का आगाज हो चुका है। इसी के साथ साथ
The state 831 development projects have been launched in Balochistan along with other plans and other projects of the government.
और वहाँ पुलिस और ज़िले इंतज़ामिया को इख्तियारात की मुंतकली भी रद्दुल फसाद ऑपरेशन के ही समरात। टेररिज्म से टूरिज्म का ये सफ़र इंतहाई कठिन और सब्र आजमा था। आज अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह पाकिस्तान में खेलों के मैदान आबाद हैं। ग्वादर, नॉर्दर्न एरियाज़, K2 दुनिया की तवज्जो का मरकज़ बने हुए हैं। वो इलाके जो दहशतगर्दी का
Transition from terrorism to tourism has been difficult not only for the forces but for the entire country. And today Pakistan is the center of worldwide tourism.
इसी दौरान पिछला एक साल पाकिस्तान को एक कुदरती आफत का सामना हुआ। ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद जारी था, मगर साथ ही जब कोविड-19 ने मुल्क में अपने पंजे गाड़े तो उसमें भी बतौर कौम इस चैलेंज का भी हिकमत और दानिशमंदी से हम लोगों ने मुकाबला किया अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह। इस वक्त इस मद में वैक्सीनेशन का अमल जारी है। अफवाज पाकिस्तान को जो चाइनीज
Speaking about the COVID-19 pandemic that struck the world, and he's once again narrated that with the effective planning and countering measures, the COVID-19 pandemic inside Pakistan has also been controlled.
फ्रंटलाइन हेल्थ वर्कर्स हैं, उनको सबसे पहले वैक्सीनेट किया जाए जो कीमती जानों को बचाने में मसरूफ़ हैं।
And the process of vaccination is going on right now, and the front health workers have the priority of being vaccinated first, as they are fighting the virus without any weapons, and they have laid down many lives in protecting patients from the virus.
सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइड की गई। ये कहने का मकसद ये है कि पिछले एक साल में भी जब हम इन कुदरती आफात से भी नबरद आजमा थे, ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद नहीं रुका। फेंसिंग भी चलती रही, इंटेलिजेंस बेस्ड ऑपरेशंस भी चलते रहे, और उसके अलावा जो लेफ़्ट ओवर एरियाज़ की क्लियरेंस का काम था वो भी साथ साथ चलता रहा। सो अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह इस ऑपरेशन के समरात बड़े वाज़े तौर पे
even during the pandemic, the Operation Raddul Fasad did not stop, and the fencing on the borders had been going on, and also intelligence operations were kept on going to counter terrorism inside the country to root them out.
और एक पॉजिटिव और ऑब्जेक्टिव तरीके से इन तमाम चीज़ों को कवर किया। अब अगर मैं बिल्कुल सामने की बात करूं तो नेक्स्ट मंथ इंशाल्लाह यौम पाकिस्तान 23 मार्च आ रहा है।
And Major General Babar Iftikhar has also praised the contribution of the media in promoting a soft image and highlighting these segments in the society, and helped in fighting and conducting the Raddul Fasad operation to counter those fake and violent narratives.
We have come a long way, but I must say that there is still a lot of ground to be covered, और वो हम एक रह के इकट्ठे रह के ही कवर कर सकते हैं, और आवाम के ताउन से हम हर चैलेंज पर इंशाल्लाह काबू पाएंगे। और इसी मुनासबत से क्योंकि 21वीं सदी की तीसरी दहाई का आगाज़ हो चुका है, और पिछली 2 दहाइयों में जिस तरह से हमने एक कौम के तौर पर चैलेंजेस का मुकाबला किया और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह उन पर काबू पाया, इसी मुनासबत से इस मरतबा यौम पाकिस्तान का मैसेज है, एक कौम एक मंजिल। पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद इंशाल्लाह। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
डॉक्टर साहब मेरा नाम एजाज अहमद है और मैं जीएनएन को रिप्रेजेंट
That was
करता हूँ।
Major General Babar Iftikhar addressing, and lastly he just said that unity has to come up and the country requires unity to cover the left, the operation, the amount of operation that is left to counter terrorism, to root those terrorism out of the country. And he also once again praised the contribution of the civilians also in their collective support with the forces. And he also said that with the continuous support of the civilians of the whole nation, the armed forces of Pakistan will counter every challenge that comes their way. And he also stated that about the Pakistan Day message, and he said, "One nation and we have one destination." He also, during the media briefing, he was speaking about the Raddul Fasad operation, and as he mentioned, 375,000 operations were conducted to counter terrorism inside the country, and out of which 150,000 operations were conducted in the province. 80,000 operations were covered in Balochistan.
ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद, जैसे मैंने कहा कि सिर्फ एक मिलिट्री ऑपरेशन नहीं था, इसका दायरा कार मुख्तलिफ शोबों पे और पूरे मुल्क पे मुहित था। और अगर नेशनल एक्शन प्लान को ही देखा जाए तो ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद के तहत मैंने जिन तमाम कार्डिनल्स का जिक्र किया, जिन तमाम पॉइंट्स का जिक्र किया, वो नेशनल एक्शन प्लान का हिस्सा थे। नेशनल एक्शन प्लान के ऊपर जो प्रोग्रेस है वो अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह बहुत हद तक की जा चुकी है। कुछ ऐसे इश्यूज हैं जिन पे मजीद थोड़ा काम होना बाकी है।
was not only a military operation, but it covered the whole country, and with that they also developed a national action plan that was to counter the narratives, the fake news and the violent segments also in society. Also they came collectively in the circle of Raddul Fasad operation.
बहुत तेजी से हो रहा है और इंशाल्लाह वो भी जल्द मुकम्मल होंगे, बिकॉज ये सारा एक, जैसे मैंने कहा, वो होल ऑफ नेशन अप्रोच के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में नेशनल एक्शन प्लान बनाया गया था और उसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बात हो रही है। जैसे मैंने अभी बताया कि अभी आपकी जो बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट है, जो कि पाकिस्तान को सिक्योर करने का एक बहुत बड़ा रिक्वायरमेंट थी, बेटर बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट, वो इस वक्त मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंटीरियर के अंडर जा चुकी है और वही उसका लीड इदारा है। इसी तरह अगर मैं वन बाय वन अगर उन पॉइंट्स को भी यहाँ पे
once again about the importance of the border fence, and which has come directly under the Ministry of Interior, and a better border management system has been introduced to secure the borders of Pakistan.
We are absolutely alive to that challenge, और उन challenges को जैसे जैसे environment change हो रहा है हम भी adapt कर रहे हैं, और नए उभरते हुए challenges को जो कि hybrid वॉरफेयर की डोमेन में आते हैं या फिफ्थ जनरेशन वॉरफेयर की डोमेन में आते हैं, इस मद में भी कई हुकूमती सतह पर इक़दामात हुए हैं जिनसे आप भी आगाह हैं और उन पे मज़ीद काम हो रहा है। एंड रेस्ट अश्योर्ड दैट वी आर अलाइव टू दैट एंड वी विल टेक केयर ऑफ दैट इंशाल्लाह।
You can see live images coming from Rawalpindi. Major General Babar Iftikhar, the ISPR, is holding a media conference, and he just stated about the Raddul Fasad operation, which was started in 2017, and courtesy of the Raddul Fasad operation, terrorism was defeated inside the country, and its roots were completely brought out. And also, he said that this operation, the Raddul Fasad operation, was started at such a time when in the rural areas the terrorists tried to hide, and the operation successfully was able to pick out these terrorists and send them to hell, and also to eliminate those terrorism from those societies and those areas.
अमेरिका नेटो के वहाँ पे चूँकि इन्वॉल्वमेंट है।
देखिए सच अगर मैं अफगान पीस प्रोसेस की बात करूं तो ये ऑब्वियसली फॉरेन ऑफिस की डोमेन में आता है, मैं इसको मज़ीद इसमें ज़्यादा डिटेल में नहीं जाऊंगा, बट हमें इस बात का इदराक है कि अफ़गानिस्तान के अमन के साथ ही पाकिस्तान का अमन जुड़ा हुआ है। सो ये ऐसे नहीं हो सकता कि अफ़गानिस्तान में अमन ना हो और पाकिस्तान में अमन हो सके। ये बहुत बहुत
Just answering a question from a journalist, he has just stated that the Afghan peace is directly proportional to peace in Pakistan,
हर सतह पे एक्नॉलेज किया जा रहा है।
and we have acknowledged
अब आगे
this on all
चीज़ें किस तरह
levels.
चल रही हैं, पाकिस्तान का रोल इसमें एक फैसिलिटेटर का रहा है और
Pakistan has always been a facilitator, and Pakistan will always play its role in establishing and providing help in restoring peace in Afghanistan.
उन्होंने डिसाइड करना है कि इसको आगे कैसे लेके चलना है। और अगर आप जैसी नई एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की बात करें, ऑब्वियसली उन्होंने एक जो भी पहले चल रहा था उसके रिव्यू का एक ऐलान किया है। But
the new US administration has to decide and to make out ways to how to carry on with the peace process. He was just speaking about the peace process in Afghanistan, and he just stated the new government, which is right now in the US, has to make out ways and has to carry on the peace process, because the peace in Afghanistan is directly linked to peace in Pakistan. And earlier he also stated in the Operation Raddul Fasad, 375,000 operations were successfully conducted, and 92,000 operations were conducted in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, 80,000 operations were conducted in Balochistan province, 150,000 operations were conducted in
आपने जो
Sindh.
फौजी फाउंडेशन हॉस्पिटल की बात की, मैं इसके ऊपर कमेंट अभी नहीं कर सकता, बिकॉज मेरे पास इसके ऊपर कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं है। बट आई एश्योर यू फौजी फाउंडेशन से रिलेटेड जो इदारे हैं उनको बहुत बेहतर तरीके से मैनेज किया जा रहा है। एज़ फार एज नंबर ऑफ कैजुअल्टीज़ इज़ कंसर्न, मैंने मेरे ख्याल में अपनी ब्रीफ में कैजुअल्टीज़ बताई हैं आपको। टेररिस्ट की कैजुअल्टीज़ मैंने आपको बताई हैं। आर्म फोर्सेस की कैजुअल्टीज़ हुई हैं इसमें, उसका एग्जैक्ट फिगर्स मेरे ख्याल में तकरीबन लेट मी गो थ्रू इट।
You can see live images coming on your screens from Rahul Pindi, the Director General of ISPR, is holding a media briefing.
के दौरान इस सबको मिला के, ठीक जी
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम जनरल साहब।
Raddul Fasad had, courtesy of Raddul Fasad operation, terrorism was eliminated in the whole country, especially in the rural areas where the terrorists tried to hide. And courtesy of the Raddul Fasad operation, now that there is peace in those areas, speaking about the Balochistan province, which is a hub of tourism worldwide now, the DG has just stated that 831 development projects have been launched, and the process of terrorism to tourism was hard, and right now Pakistan is a center stage for international tourism. And he also spoke about how COVID-19 pandemic affected Pakistan, and the forces, with the help of the other organizations and the government, and obviously with the help of the civilians, were able to successfully plan and counter the COVID-19 pandemic inside the country. And he also said that Raddul Fasad operation did not
stop. को तो बहुत पॉजिटिवली रिस्पॉन्ड किया है इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी ने, और हर फोरम पे उसको बड़ा सीरियसली लिया गया, और उसी की एज अ कॉरलरी टू दैट बहुत सी इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ने ऑफ लेट कुछ ऐसे डॉक्यूमेंट्स, कुछ ऐसी स्टेटमेंट्स भी दी हैं जो इस बात का वाज़ेह सबूत है कि उस डोज़ियर के तहत जो कुछ भी शेयर किया गया उसको ऑब्जेक्टिवली देखा जा रहा है। एज़ फार एज़ टेररिस्ट सपोर्ट, फाइनेंसिंग, उनके जो अबैटर्स हैं, उनका नेटवर्क, मैंने जिस तरह पहले कहा कि इनमें से बेशतर नेटवर्क्स को हमने अनर्थ भी किया है और उनको ख़त्म भी किया है। आजकल जो अगर आप
once again stated that the international organizations have exposed the fake narratives which were being built by the enemies of Pakistan through documents and statements internationally, and a lot of those were also presented to various international organizations exposing the activity of enemies of Pakistan trying to destabilize the image by producing fake narrative.
और लेकिन मैंने जैसे कहा कि अभी बहुत काम करना बाकी भी है, और एज वी मूव अहेड तो ये जो थ्रेट है ये भी अपनी जो उसका शक्ल है उसको चेंज कर रही है, और नई टेक्नोलॉजीज़ इन्वॉल्व हो रही हैं। सो इन सिस्टम्स को बड़े बेहतर तरीके से अभी टारगेट भी किया जा रहा है, नेटवर्क्स को, इस इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को, और मज़ीद इसके अंदर बहुत पॉजिटिव डेवलपमेंट्स आगे भी इंशाल्लाह आपको देखने को मिलेंगी। जी।
You can see live images coming from Rawalpindi. The Director General ISPR, Major General Babar Iftikhar, is holding a media conference. And just to remind you, earlier in the conference, he stated that talking about Balochistan province, there are more than 3,865 levies under training from the forces to counter and to protect those rural areas. And also the temporarily displaced persons, the return process to their homes has also started.
तंजीम को आप टेक आउट करते हैं तो कोई और उसको निकल आता है, और सोशल मीडिया पे तो ख़ास तौर पे बहुत ज़्यादा एक प्रोलिफरेशन है इस तरह के मवाद की, एंड सोशल मीडिया को उस तरह से मेरे ख्याल में जो इसका स्वात है जितना वो स्प्रेड हो चुका है, बहुत इफेक्टिवली शायद रेगुलेट भी नहीं किया जा सकता। उसकी मद में कुछ कोशिश की जा रही है ताकि एटलीस्ट जो हेट स्पीच है या शिद्दत पसंद मवाद है या जो ऐसी तंजीमें हैं जो अपना नैरेटिव सोशल मीडिया के ऊपर प्रोलिफरेट करती हैं और लोगों को मिसलीड कर रही हैं, उनको टारगेट किया जा सके, और उसके ऊपर बहुत हद तक काम हो चुका है, और वेरी सून उसके ऊपर इंशाल्लाह कुछ ना कुछ लेजिस्लेशन भी हुकूमत उसके ऊपर काम कर रही है। लेकिन अगर आप उनकी ट्रैक्शन की बात करें, ऐसी तंजीमों की या ऐसे मवाद की या ऐसे लोगों की, मैंने जैसे कहा कि हमारे तमाम मकातब फ़िक्र के उलमा ने जो इकट्ठे होकर पैगाम पाकिस्तान के नाम से जो एक नैरेटिव दिया, उसका बहुत पॉजिटिव इम्पैक्ट आया है।
And answering a question, DG ISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar has also stated that social media is a very large network, and it has been able to spread its roots across the country and across the world. And the armed forces are also trying to curb the spread of hate speech and the violent narratives which are being produced and which are being spread through on social media. And the armed forces have been successfully been able to counter these organizations or these persons who have been trying to spread hate speech in the country, who have been trying to spread to teach a violent narrative. And the armed forces have been successful in controlling these aspects as well, and very near all of these aspects, these persons, these organizations will be also countered and rooted out.
दोषियों तो एक बड़ा concentrated सा एक information थी जो आपके साथ शेयर की गई थी, but there is a lot more to it. बहुत और भी information, और ये जो गवर्नमेंट टू गवर्नमेंट कॉन्टैक्ट्स हैं उनके अंदर ये चीज़ें बड़े फाल एक मैकेनिज्म के तहत उनके ऊपर बातचीत की जाती है, और उसके ऊपर
various dossiers that were presented to various international organizations, and he's just stated that the information in those dossiers is pretty limited, and there is a lot more information which is not in those dossiers, which is only been discussed state to state, government to government level.
वो बहुत एक इम्पोर्टेंट अंडरटेकिंग थी इस ऑपरेशन रद्दुल फसाद के तहत, बिकॉज बॉर्डर्स को ख़ास तौर पे जो हमारा वेस्टर्न जोन का बॉर्डर है उसको सिक्योर करना और उसको इस तरह से मैनेज करना कि वहाँ पे ये जो फ्री आमदोरफ्त थी नेगेटिव एलिमेंट्स की, उसको रोका जा सके। सो उसका डिविडेंड अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह ऑलरेडी आना शुरू हो गया है। आप इंसिडेंट्स की बात करते हैं, जो है अगर ये इंसिडेंट्स को देखा जाए तो मैं थोड़ा सा आपको सजेस्ट करूंगा कि इसको ऐसे देखें कि वी आर गोइंग आफ्टर द रेजिडुअल जो उनकी थ्रेट है, जो रेमिनेंट्स हैं उनके पीछे बड़ा अग्रेसिवली जा रहे हैं। एंड व्हेन यू गो आफ्टर समवन अग्रेसिवली,
Major General Babar Iftikhar has also stated the importance of securing the borders of Pakistan, and pointing out to the west side of Pakistan's border. He said that securing that border was very important for the security of Pakistan, as the people before the operation of the Fasad, they used to commute, come and go pretty easily. So the border management system was to be introduced to secure the borders, and after securing the western borders, the Major General Babar Iftikhar has also stated that the country, the forces, the country as a whole have also started receiving the dividends of securing the western borders, as the flow of the people of the terrorists have been stopped. You can see live images coming from Rawalpindi. Major General Babar Iftikhar, the DG of Inter-Services Public Relations, is holding a media briefing. And most importantly, he spoke about the Operation Razul Fasad, which was started on in 2017. And courtesy of the operation, there were more than 344 terrorists which were awarded with the death sentence, and there were 106 were awarded with the life sentence.
एक प्रोसीजर है इसका, उस प्रोसीजर के तहत जो उनकी ऑब्जर्वेशंस थी उसके ऊपर बहुत काम हुआ है. मैं मतलब यू नीड अ सेपरेट सेशन टू एक्सप्लेन कि उन नुकात पे जो ऑब्जर्वेशन दी गई थी उनके ऊपर किस हद तक काम मुकम्मल किया जा चुका है. और अभी जो 25 तारीख को मेरे ख्याल में इसकी प्लेनरी है, उसमें जो इस FATF का जो फोरम है, इसकी एक बहुत बड़ी एक बाइंडिंग रेगुलेशन ये है कि आप किसी चीज़ के बारे में उससे पहले शेयर नहीं कर सकते, कोई बात नहीं कर सकते. सो दैट इज़ वाई मैं इसके ऊपर कुछ ज़्यादा कमेंट नहीं करूँगा, बट लेट मी टेल यू वेरी वेरी क्लियरली दैट वो जो एक्नॉलेजमेंट है जो पाकिस्तान ने ये सफ़र तय किया है पिछले 4 सालों में, वो हर लेवल पे है, हर सतह पे है. एंड इंशाल्लाह इस फोरम पे भी वो एक्नॉलेजमेंट आना शुरू हो जाएगी. सो बहुत काम हुआ है, बहुत ज़्यादा काम हुआ है, और उसको ड्यूली एक्नॉलेज किया. बट यू अंडरस्टैंड, एक लॉबिंग भी होती है इस लेवल पे. जब भी हम जाते हैं देयर आर सर्टन लॉबीज जो हमारे अगेंस्ट काम करना शुरू कर देती हैं, बट अभी हमने उन प्रॉब्लम्स को बहुत हद तक ओवरकम कर लिया. और इंशाल्लाह we're very optimistic
right now, speaking about the FATF, and he's not being able to share very much information because of the binding procedures of the FATF, but he has shared this, that the acknowledgement Pakistan has received has been on every level, and a lot of work has been done to remove Pakistan from the list of FATF. And he is also stated once again that different lobbies, different enemies of Pakistan always start lobbying against Pakistan to keep it in the FATF. But there is acknowledgement on the efforts of Pakistan, and which is internationally accepted, that Pakistan has done a lot, and it has also been successfully been able to eliminate terrorism inside the country through all means. What we need to do is that we need to stay the course and have patience to understand कि हमने इसको आगे लेके चलना है. So things are very positive. ये इंसिडेंट स्पेसिफिक हमें नहीं होना चाहिए, हमें ओवरऑल चीज़ों को देखना चाहिए. और इंशाल्लाह ये जो बिल्ड एंड ट्रांसफ़र फेज़ है, जब ये मुकम्मल होगा, जब ये कबायली अज़ला भरपूर तरीके से सूबे में जम हो जाएंगे, जो इन्वेस्टमेंट यहाँ पे आनी है, जो सोशो इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट यहाँ पे होनी है, जब पुलिसिंग यहाँ पे नॉर्मलाइज हो जाएगी, नॉर्मल पुलिसिंग जब हो जाएगी. जैसे मैंने कहा, हम अभी 3000 का एक बैच पिछले दिनों पास आउट हुआ है, और तकरीबन 4000 मजीद अभी अगली हम ट्रेन कर रहे हैं. सो वो लोग once again talking about the rural areas, and the armed forces are continuously trying to bring the rid of the state in those areas in which terrorists had their footprinted. And he's also once again highlighted that more than 3,000 levies forces are being trained, and more than 3,000 are under training, and that is to produce them, and that is to help those rural areas, to secure those rural areas. And he said that normal policing will also be started in those areas to secure them, to hold control of them.
These are baseless speculations, और मैं आपसे ये रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि इन चीज़ों के बारे में सोचना या अपनी कयास आराइयाँ नहीं होनी चाहिए. फ़ौज, अगर मैं बात करूँ एक इदारे के तौर पे, फौज में जो अपॉइंटमेंट्स हैं,
and is also once again highlighting and is stated, answering a question of a journalist, that regarding the news of the change in command of the inter-services intelligence of the ISI, which is the intelligence organization of the Pakistan Army, and these news are baseless and they are fake.
Speculation है, इसमें किसी किस्म की कोई सदाकत नहीं है, कोई सच्चाई नहीं है, and I would request not to speculate further on this thing. Thank you.
And is also requested not to speculate on these fake news.
Thank you, sir. Javed Baloch, Bureau Chief, New
Now,
TV.
Major General Babar Iftikhar from Rawalpindi, he is the Director General of ISPR, is talking about the Raddul Fasad operation and how successful the armed forces of Pakistan have been able to counter terrorism, to counter violent narratives, to counter hate speeches. And the Operation Raddul Fasad was not just only a specific region, but it was conducted throughout the country on all levels.
ये मेरी परव्यू में नहीं आता चीज़, बट जहाँ पे कोई इंसिडेंट होता है, स्पेशली जो टेररिज्म रिलेटेड इंसिडेंट है, यूजुअली हुकूमत उस सूबे की, वहाँ की सिविल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन उनको उनके लिए कुछ ना कुछ माली इमदाद का उनके फैमिलीज़ के लिए, लवाकिन के लिए ज़रूर ऐलान करती है। इससे ज़्यादा मैं इस बारे में कमेंट नहीं कर सकता, बिकॉज़ ये मेरे परव्यू में नहीं आता कि सिविलियन साइड पे क्या हो रहा है। बट यस, जैसे आपने कहा, ये कुर्बानियाँ सिर्फ इदारों ने, फ़ौज ने या पुलिस ने या नहीं दी हैं, ज़्यादा कुर्बानियाँ अवाम ने दी हैं। और उससे बड़ी चीज़ ये है कि ये जो जंग हमने लड़ी है, ये अगर अवाम की सपोर्ट ना होती और अवाम की रेजिलियंस ना होती,
Babar Iftikhar just stated that the civilians have given greater sacrifices in the war against terrorism, and the forces would not have been able to successfully counter terrorism, to fight terrorism in the country without the support of the people of Pakistan. And he's also requested that the armed forces require the support of all the people, all of the nationals of all Pakistanis.
In the last week. First was from Russian presidential envoy in Afghanistan, Zamir Kabulov, and second was CENTCOM, the incoming CENTCOM commander, General Kenneth. So I just wanted to know, did we test our waters with the incoming personalities that what Pakistan is doing is actually being not just cherished, but they are also of the view that Pakistan is a key player, and they should be the one who should take up this issue with the Afghan quarters, that Afghan soil should not be used against Pakistan, because in recent past we saw we lost precious lives from a civilian side and military side as well. So what is the status right now? Because on the other side we successfully conducted many bilateral and multilateral exercises, military exercises, that shows that Pakistan has successfully shown it to the enemy that Pakistan is not diplomatically isolated. So what's your take on that? Who is on Pakistan's side, and who will be taking up this case with the Afghan government? Thank you so much.
As I said earlier, we not, if we talk of the Afghan peace process, we're not taking sides or anything. This is what Pakistan's stance is, and I said, I mean, it's better to ask the Foreign Office about this thing. But yes, the visiting dignitaries did meet the Chief of Army Staff, and that should also give a very clear understanding of how important Pakistan is to the fruition of this peace process, and the fact that everybody is talking to us is also a very clear indication of how positively Pakistan has contributed to the Afghan peace process. So what comes next, as I said, is not in our purview. Obviously, when somebody is here, we share very candidly what our point of view is, and they also share their point of view. And so far, as we move ahead, I think everybody's listening to everyone, and everybody understands the opposing side's point of view, and it's progressing very in a positive direction. There are a lot of, yes, there are hurdles in between, but those hurdles have been overcome before, and I'm sure they'll be overcome in times to come as well. So there is a very clear understanding of Pakistan's positive role in this thing. and Pakistan's point of view is being accepted. But as I said, we have no favorites. Our only interest in Afghan peace process is peace in Afghanistan, because as I said, Pakistan's peace is absolutely connected to peace in Afghanistan. And as we've gone ahead in Raddul Fasad and the Western Zone management and all that, our ultimate aim and objective is that we should have peace in this region, in this complete region. That's how we are progressing right now.
Well, that was Major General Babar Iftikhar, the DG ISPR, holding a media briefing. And he was speaking about the process, the Operation Raddul Fasad, and it's successful. Right now, we'll add the top stories from around the world. Pakistan Army says its forces have foiled plans of hostile agencies to radicalize Pakistani youth, giving an overview of the dividends earned through Operation Raddul Fasad, which was launched 4 years ago. Director General of ISPR, Major General Babar Iftikhar, said this operation was not area-specific and its domain extended to the entire country. He said terrorists and extremists are rendered completely ineffective by curtailing their freedom of action. The UN Atomic Watchdog has reached an agreement with Iran to continue its necessary verification and monitoring Tehran's nuclear activities for up to 3 months. In a press briefing following his return from Iran, the IAEA's chief, Rafael Grossi, said there will be less access and no more snap inspections from Tuesday. Grossi said talks with Iranian officials have produced a good, reasonable result that salvages the situation for now. The United Nations has called on Myanmar's military to stop the repression immediately and release the prisoners. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' statement comes as a general strike is being observed in Myanmar to oppose the coup. Thousands of protesters have gathered across the country despite the military ruler's threat that confrontation would cost more lives. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will end in early 2022. WHO's Director for Europe, Hans Kluge, said the pandemic will still be prevalent in 2021, but more manageable than last year. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected more than 111 million people so far. Pakistan has reported 16 deaths overnight, the lowest number of fatalities since the second wave started in the country. These were the headlines. We'll take you live. Major General Babar Iftikhar is holding a media conference.
की जाती है कि हमें फ्यूचर में किस किस्म के इक्विपमेंट की ज़रूरत पड़ने वाली है, और वो इक्विपमेंट जो है, जो भी डेवलपमेंट मुसल्लह अफवाज में होती है, उसका ताल्लुक अपने जो थ्रेट है, थ्रेट परसेप्शन से होता है, उस कैपेबिलिटी से होता है जो आपके सामने पड़ी हुई है. उस कैपेबिलिटी को सामने रख के आप अपनी डेवलपमेंट करते हैं. सो दैट्स हाउ वी आर प्रोग्रेसिंग. ट्रेनिंग भी और इक्विपमेंट इंडक्शन की अगर आप बात करें. आपने सोशल मीडिया की बात की, आपने साइबर की बात की. यस, वी हैव अ डिसएडवांटेज इन दिस फील्ड. साइबर के अंदर वी से मुराद मैं इदारे की बात नहीं कर रहा, मैं एज अ होल बात कर रहा हूँ अगर हम इसको देखें. और इसमें बहुत काम होने वाला है. और जैसे मैंने कहा कि एज जो थ्रेट्स चेंज हो रही हैं, ट्रांसफॉर्म हो रही हैं, उसी तरह हमारे रिस्पॉन्सेस भी ट्रांसफॉर्म हो रहे हैं. सो साइबर डोमेन के अंदर भी जो जिस तरह से टारगेट किया जा रहा है एक माइंडसेट को. साइबर डोमेन का मसला ये है कि सोशल मीडिया पे कोई कुछ कह देता है, कुछ लिख देता है, चाहे वो गलत भी हो, उसको फॉरवर्ड कर दिया जाता है, वो हर एक तक पहुंच जाता है. एंड बहुत से लोग हैं जो
Major General Babar Iftikhar speaking about the social media and also the cybersecurity, in which worldwide the way of countering and it has changed, and Pakistan right now has a disadvantage in this specific field, but work is being done to counter social media and cybersecurity to effectively counter these elements, and is also said that a lot of work needs to be done. And as he's also said that threats are transforming, and the responses to these threats also needs to be transformed, and the nation needs to be aware of such threats, and fake information and violent and hate speech should not be shared online.
जा रहे हैं और इसके ऊपर बहुत काम हो रहा है. मैंने recently I had interacted with one of the ministers also on this thing. हम कुछ काम कर रहे थे. So there is a lot of positive development in this direction also. But जैसे मैंने कहा कि हमारा जो disadvantage है उसको हमने लेके चलना है, और वो again मैं ये समझता हूँ कि हमारा जो youth है उन्होंने इसमें अपनी capacity को develop करना है और enhance करना है. That's how we have to go ahead in this thing.
And once again, speaking about the importance of the warfare which has now landed on the social media platform, on the digital platform, is once again highlighted the importance of the youth of the country, because this is now their domain, and they have to build up the capacity in order to counter the war on social media, to counter the fake narratives, to counter fake speech, I beg your pardon, hate speech, to counter violent narratives, violent thoughts, and also to stop and sharing all this fake news and stuff which can be harmful as a whole. And it's also stated that the country is at disadvantage over this field, especially when it comes to social media and cyber and the digital warfare, but a lot of work has been done, a lot of successful operations have been done, and the armed forces, with the help of the nation, will continue to counter and to win the war on social media and the digital platform as well. And earlier, speaking about the Radul Fasad operation, Major General Babar Iftikhar has stated that the operation, as was started in 2017, and a lot of success has been garnered with that operation, and terrorism has been completely defeated inside the country.
Recently, EU Disinformation Lab के जो revelations हैं, उसने पिछले 15 साल पे मुहित हैं, पिछले 15 साल पे, और वो पूरी दुनिया में शेयर किए गए हैं, और वो हमने कोई ऐसा कोई मतलब किसी गवर्नमेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से, पाकिस्तान गवर्नमेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने नहीं किया, वो यूरोपियन यूनियन की एक रिलेटेड एक इदारा है जिसने किया. सो उसकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग है. जैसे मैंने कहा, सोशल मीडिया पे
disinformation और propaganda
की एक बहुत मेजर स्ट्रीम है.
Report of the EU Disinfo Lab, which exposed Indian terrorism against Pakistan in building a fake narrative, was active from the last 15 years.
I mean, you can understand
that this was exposed by an international organization, not by the country itself.
ने इसको अनर्थ किया. मेरे ख्याल में क्रेडिबिलिटी के बहुत ज़्यादा इश्यूज आ गए हैं उस साइड पे, और जिस नौयत की बातचीत की जाती है, कुछ और भी पिछले दिनों एक लीक्स आए थे एक अर्नब गोस्वामी साहब के नाम से, उनको भी आपने सुना कि वो किस तरह हुए. तो वो क्रेडिबिलिटी ऑटोमेटिकली इतना झूठ बोल के उस क्रेडिबिलिटी को बहुत डेंट,
बहुत also highlighted, is also stated answering the question about the credibility of India internationally. The image now that India has brought up itself to is continuously declining, and the credibility of Indian news is continuously declining, as it gave the example of the anchor person of India, Arnab Goswami, and the leaks, the WhatsApp chat leaks, in which Arnab Goswami had prior information before the Pulwama attack, and he was rejoicing. And although Arnab Goswami, being an Indian anchor, was rejoicing the upcoming operation, the fake operation, fake terrorist attack, which was to be blamed on Pakistani, was conducted by India itself, and they killed a lot of their soldiers as well in that attack.
No doubt उस पे कोई question ही नहीं है, लेकिन हमारी जो कौम है वो
coming from Rawalpindi. This is the DG ISPR, Major General Babar Iftikhar, holding a press conference, and just right now, just a few moments ago, he spoke about the how the credibility of India internationally is continuously at decline, courtesy of the EU Disinformation Lab report, which was exposed the fake Indian narrative building against Pakistan, which was going on from the last 15 years.
इस कोविड वबा के दौरान जिस तरह से हुकूमती इक़दामात को कवर किया, जिस तरह से जहाँ पे मसाइल थे लोगों को कवर किया और उसको उन मसाइल को उजागर किया और उनको आइडेंटिफाई मीडिया ने किया, तो वहाँ तक भी हुकूमती सपोर्ट पहुँची। बहुत से ऐसे मौके आए जहाँ पे फौज डिप्लॉयड थी और कुछ जगहों पे मीडिया ने इंडिकेट किया कि इन जगहों पे
answering a question is speaking about how the armed forces, with the collective help of the government, under the guidance of the government, was able to successfully curb the spread of the coronavirus inside the country.
हर एक को वैक्सीन की ज़रूरत है, हर एक को ज़रूरत है।
And right now, speaking about the vaccines, he says that the process of vaccination is continuously going on, and the first priority is the frontline health workers, and eventually, obviously, everyone requires a vaccine against the coronavirus pandemic.
हुकूमत ने इसको उसके ऊपर फैसला करना है, और फौज का जहाँ तक ताल्लुक है,
but the process of vaccinating the entire population, all those after the frontline health workers, is to be decided by the government.
इसी जज्बे के साथ ये किया गया कि पहले वो लोग जो हमसे ज़्यादा vulnerable हैं, हमसे ज़्यादा deserve करते हैं. So that was the only reason. और इस मद में ये फैसला किया गया, और आगे हुकूमत ने
and the government decided that the vaccination process will be conducted as and as in the cases of who deserve this worst, and right now the frontline health workers deserve being vaccinated first because they are at the front fighting this virus.
The media and the armed forces. We can have the last question.
Major General Babar Iftikhar, holding a media conference in Rawalpindi, is speaking about how successful the Operation Raddul Fasad has been, and he also highlighted once again how the credibility of India as a whole is at the decline continuously. Internationally, this is being accepted that India is spreading fake news, fake narratives, and the credibility of Indian media has also been jolted, courtesy of Arnab Goswami, the WhatsApp leaks in which he had prior information about the Pulwama attack, which was blamed on Pakistan.
कायम किए गए थे जब ये एक जंग चल रही थी, और उसके दौरान जब लोग वापस आना शुरू हुए, और उसी के तहत स्किल डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम्स भी चलाए गए कि उन लोगों को मुख्तलिफ स्किल्स सिखाई जाएं, चाहे वो ड्राइविंग है, चाहे वो कारपेंटर है या वेल्डिंग है, मतलब एक मुआशरे के अंदर एक अपना एक रोज़गार कमा सकें वो लोग। और सिमिलरली उनकी जो उस डीरेडिकलाइजेशन फेज़ के दौरान उनको मुख्तलिफ एक साइकोलॉजिकल डोमेन में, मोटिवेशनल डोमेन में उनको इस तरह से उनके साथ इंटरेक्ट किया गया, और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह वो उसका बहुत पॉजिटिव इम्पैक्ट आया, और उसके बाद उनको कुछ अर्सा अंडर ऑब्जर्वेशन भी जिस इलाके में जहाँ पे मौजूद है फौज है या सिविल इदारे हैं उनके तहत उनको, क्योंकि वो रिकॉर्डेड एक था और एज दे बिकम नॉर्मल सिटीजन्स ऑफ द सोसाइटी, सो देयर इज नो नीड टू ऑब्जर्व देम एनी फर्दर. सो एक मैकेनिज्म के तहत ये किया गया और इसका बहुत पॉजिटिव रिजल्ट आया.
And now through a mechanism, he said that the people and the process of de-radicalization of the people who were captured, and that phase was difficult, but the armed forces were successful in conducting motivating those persons and also kept them under observation.
Thank you, sir. This is Zargun Shah from Geo Television.
From
Geo Television. Sir, Operation Raddul Fasad का एक बहुत ही खूबसूरत
The Director General of ISPR, Major General Babar Iftikhar, is holding a media briefing, and he started off with the Pakistan's Operation Raddul Fasad, which was started in 2017 and which has been successful in eliminating terrorism inside the country. And he said that Raddul Fasad operation was not area specific. It was spread throughout the country on all levels, and terrorism has been defeated on all those levels which were trying to destabilize the country through all means.
गवादर क्रिकेट स्टेडियम की जब उसकी तस्वीरें सामने आई तो आई थिंक आईसीसी ने भी उसको ट्वीट किया था. तो पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट बोर्ड इज़ इन पिक्चर ऑफ दैट एंड दे आर वेरी एक्साइटेड अबाउट दिस. बट ऑब्वियसली इंटरनेशनल लेवल के मैचेस कराने के लिए कुछ और रिक्वायरमेंट्स होती हैं. लेट्स होप कि वो रिक्वायरमेंट्स अगर ये स्टेडियम मीट करता है तो वन डे इंशाल्लाह मे बी एक PSL मैच भी वहाँ पे हो. मे बी नॉट दिस टाइम, मे बी नेक्स्ट ईयर, बट नो डाउट it is one of the most beautiful stadiums
right
in the
now.
world.
Speaking about
right
the
now.
most beautiful cricket stadium of the world, the Gwadar Cricket Stadium, and he said that to conduct those matches, international matches at the Gwadar Cricket Stadium, there are certain international requirements, and it must be possible, and it's going to be held now. And that was DG ISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar holding a media press briefing. He spoke about the Operation Raddul Fasad, which was started in 2017, and courtesy of that operation, terrorism inside the country had been defeated successfully. And also that he said that this Operation Raddul Fasad was started at such a time when the terrorists started to hide in rural areas, and the army and the armed forces, with the help of the nation, were successful in identifying those terrorism and those areas in which these people were hiding, and they were able to successfully root them out. Very important information that is that in the Operation Raddul Fasad, there was 375,000 operations conducted through various armed forces and their groups. And now for more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, retired. Now, sir, thank you very much for your time. Now, the DG ISPR spoke about the Operation Raddul Fasad, which has completed its 4 years today. How do you see Pakistani security forces' success in the operation?
Pakistan has come a very long way. Those of us who have seen it happening to Pakistan, and then Pakistan's response starting 2008, 2009, there's been very tough, very, very demanding journey from there on. And as DG said, from terrorism to tourism, it's not been easy. People of Pakistan have sacrificed a lot. We lost a lot of very valuable lives. And that, I think, is something to be grateful for. Second thing, which I think is a very important thing that DG brought out, was that it was not possible unless people of Pakistan was totally with and standing with the Pakistan Armed Forces. That, I think, defines Pakistan Army. That defines Pakistan. That defines Pakistan's main strength, of course, belief in Allah Kareem. And the third thing is that starting from 2008, where Pakistan was scared, the world was scared, we were actually being dubbed as the epicenter of terrorism in the world. Today, you find that the world is now coming back to what is Pakistan's reality. It's real. It's a very important country in the region. The connectivity is critical. Sports is coming back to Pakistan. tourism is coming back to Pakistan, and Pakistan's economy, which has actually touched rock bottom, is now recovering slowly. It's a painful journey, slowly, but it's doing that. And overall, if you see that the peace in Pakistan today is something that we have started taking for granted. And those of us who have been through this, they can tell you that it wasn't so always. And I think that's the highlight of today's briefing. But also we must remember that the journey is not over. And the war that Pakistan is now subjected to has many wider dimensions, like cyber warfare. There, Pakistan has still to come up to speed and meet the challenges that we are faced with. The Pakistan that is being pressurized from, let's say, from India across the border, and India using, and other countries using Pakistan's soil to undo what Pakistan has done. That I think is something that we need to be on the guard. And also we need to be on the guard with regard to how our social media domain is being used or misused for and against Pakistan. And I think all in all, we can take a lot of heart from it. And we can also be grateful to Almighty Allah. But more importantly, we must continue. This is what I think was the crux. Finally, before I sign off, I think you must have noticed that the DGISPR was deliberately avoiding stepping into what is civil government's domain. It deliberately opted not to answer the questions which are purely in the civil government's domain, highlighting this fact that the armed forces of today recognize the civilian supremacy, and that is how I think it should be. And that is what people of Pakistan, and that is what distractors of Pakistan armed forces must understand.
Right, and lastly, sir, the government's writ has been imposed in tribal areas while over 300 terrorists were neutralized. What is your take on the elimination of terrorism from Pakistan?
I think we have done the major work. Now it's time to, wrap up. It's time to, we can't lower our guards because the threat from across the border and the enemy from within is not yet over. And all those cells, sleeper cells, have not been eliminated. But terrorism, as it was about 15, 16 years back, is now down to about, I think, if you scale of 1 to 100, if it was 100 at that time, it's now something like 5, 6. Obviously, we're taking casualties. Our soldiers are still in the field, sacrificing themselves for the sake of our people and the country, Pakistan. That is something that we must understand, that this is an ongoing tough state where the last-ditch battle is probably going on. It may take some time, but inshallah Pakistan is out of the woods and into the sunshine.
Right, sir, and also he was speaking about the domain digital warfare and of the social media. How can Pakistan as a nation and the armed forces counter the fake narrative and the spread of violence materials online?
I think this is where, as a nation, we have to, put our shoulders to the wheel. Purely armed forces can't challenge this. At the national level, I think our Ministry of Information, they have to take up this challenge, and the government has to take up this challenge. This must also be understood by our parties which are not in the government, the opposition. That whatever they say is lapped up by the people, and distorted, and sometimes quoted in the wrong context. So it has to be a total unified effort from the nation. And our young generation, which is more savvy in this field, they have to check up the challenge. And people like me who probably find it difficult to even comprehend the dimensions, our younger generation understands it far better. They're the ones who have to be educated. They're the ones who have to come up and take up this challenge. Now, their battle as much as the battle of the armed forces.
Rightly. Now, Lieutenant General Regular Mustafa, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Now, earlier, Major General Babar Iftikhar, the DG of ISPR, was holding a media conference, and he highlighted very important aspects of the Operation Radd al-Fasad, which was conducted. Now, it's been 4 years since the operation was started in 2017, and very importantly, he highlighted in the last 4 years, more than 300 terrorists were sent to hell, and a lot of them were arrested. And the Pakistan Armed Forces, with the collective help of the nation, was able to successfully root out terrorism from all the levels of inside the country. And he's also spoken about the importance and about these immense sacrifices of the intelligence agencies, and how the intelligence agencies have been able to successfully dismantle and neutralize terrorists and their planned activities and to spread terror inside the country. He just gave us a number, a brief number, and I'm sure there must be more than this. And the DGISPR mentioned that the intelligence agencies of Pakistan were able to successfully counter and stop 5,000 threats which were received by the intelligence agencies across the country, and the target was to spread terror and blood in the country. But the intelligence agencies were successfully able to counter more than, I should say, 5,000 threats before they were conducted, before they could take place. And he also spoke about the Khyber 4 operation, which was started after after Raddul Fasad operation had been begun. And the main area and the main focus of the Khyber 4 operation was to secure the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, and a border fencing was introduced. Border fences were made to secure the Pakistan-Afghan border, and the security of the Pakistan-Afghan border was of immense importance, as various people, terrorist organizations, personnel used to commute through the Pak-Afghan border, and which was pretty easier for them to commute. But right now, the Pakistan-Afghanistan border has been fenced, and as Major General Babur Khan said, more than 84% of the work of the fencing work has been completed at the Pakistan-Afghan border. And with that, he also spoke about the border that is being shared between Pakistan and Iran, and the fencing and the security and the border management system has been also introduced on that border sharing as well between Pakistan and Iran. And also again highlighting, courtesy of this Operation Khyber 4, the border between both which will also been retied. And well, Babur Iftikhar, the DG Major General of ISPR, was holding the media conference and spoke about the immense sacrifices the nation has rendered in achieving peace inside the country. And once again, he highlighted the motto of this year's coming mate is tourism, terrorism to tourism, and this journey has not been easy. We'll keep you updated with all the latest. Keep watching Indus News.